Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining me, and welcome back to the next exciting installment of Symphony 101. Um, I got a lot of great comments and suggestions and appreciation for the last movie on Sunday, which is great to get that feedback. So please keep commenting, keep sending suggestions. I'll address things as they come up. As you, if you want me to talk about it, I'll talk about it, so just let me know. Um, Today, I'm going to continue in the theme from last time, which was kind of basic definitions. So we talked about orchestra, we talked about symphony versus philharmonic, chamber orchestra, a little bit about what symphony means itself. So definitions, basic, just I suppose ballpark ideas of what these concepts mean. Today I'm going to continue with that. I'm going to begin with a very seemingly simple question that we get asked a lot as a classical musician, but it's actually not that simple an answer. What is classical music? So yeah, it's a little bit complicated. There are various definitions of it. Some people would say it's Western art music. I think in the academic world you'd find that term. Again, it's a little bit of a loaded term, but that's a very broad definition. Another would be concert music, what goes on a stage played by instrumentalists or vocalists or a pianist, or an event that we would go and see in a concert hall. It's, I suppose, all of those things. For me, it's really comes from the notion of music history, or the idea of musical periods. Obviously, we have not just classical as a genre, classical music, but we have classical as a period and a style as well within music. So that's really where the complication for me lies. There's actually one word meaning two different things. So I'm just going to do a very brief little survey of music periods, music history. Please do not turn off. This is not going to get deeply academic and musicological and boring at this point. There are times, I think, in the future when I can delve more into these musical periods, but right now I just want to show you even a color to keep your interest at maximum. This is the musical periods that we understand in music history of what happened. So we have medieval, Renaissance, Baroque, classical, romantic, and modern. And they're kind of very broad terms, and you can see the dates there as well. Medieval up to 1450, Renaissance up to 1600 or so, Baroque, which was huge, 1750, classical, which was actually quite small, up to 1820, romantic up to the 1900s or so, and then modern 20th century, that's 21st century. This is kind of where I get a little bit of a problem, I suppose, because modern to me is more of an attitude than a style. There were pieces written back here that were modernist, so it's just a very broad category, just trying to define the 20th century and 21st century, but it was a vast array of things happening here, and of course 21st century is contemporary, so that's what's happening today. Now I could go into more detail about what each of those periods meant, and but of course this is a video about orchestras, so I'm much more interested and excited talking about what they meant specifically for orchestras and ensembles. And the way I thought might be a nice way to do that is to just look at some of the pieces that were written in these periods. I'm going to start with the Baroque, because really before that, the idea of orchestral music as we know it didn't really exist. And in fact, in the Baroque period, it was evolving, it was forming this idea of a large ensemble, instrumental ensemble. was something. It was just about happening. It was just beginning to evolve. Um, and one piece that comes to mind for me is a very famous piece. Maybe not the first movement of it, but this is the. You can see it. This is the overture to Bach's Orchestral Suite Number 3, Johann Sebastian Bach, in the middle of the Baroque period. This written 1731-ish. There were 4 orchestral suites, and they were kind of, they're not exactly 1, 2, 3, 4 in order, but it's around 1730s. And you see what the instrumentation is, and that's really where I'm interested in. I will be doing a next video about the instruments of the orchestra and the families of the orchestra as we know it today. But I think this is a way to show you how we get to that. So here we have, if you can see it, if you look down the instrumentation list, which is right there beside the music, 2 oboe parts, 3 trumpet parts, trombone, and timpani part, and then we have our strings at the bottom. So that's a violin 1, a violin 2, a viola, and then the continuo, which is have the cello and the bass and harpsichord as well involved in that. So that's the Bach, and that's 1730. And that's not quite what we think of an orchestra. It's basically a string quartet, which sometimes it's played as, with some wind instruments on top. So it's not what we think of as an orchestra, but it's an orchestral suite. So this is the beginning, in some ways, of that idea of an orchestra being a large instrumental ensemble. Of course, Bach was most known for his sacred pieces, vocal pieces essentially, and that's another thing, the distinction between sacred and secular. As you get into more purely instrumental music, obviously you're heading into that secular world. Before that, you had a lot of vocal music, which was using the liturgy, actually using the religious context. So we're moving away from that when we get into the orchestral world, obviously, because we lose voices for a while, until Beethoven 9. We basically, orchestral music is purely instrumental. Still thought of it that way, but of course we have symphonies that have voices. This is the famous piece from this orchestral suite. This is the famous air, and it's only it's really for these 4 parts plus the harpsichord. There's 4 voices. Bum 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 bum. We know this piece, right? This is the air of the G string. So that's in the middle of this orchestral suite, and it's for very, very small forces, right? So that's Bach, 1730. I'm going to push on. I'm going to do this, I think, a little bit more swiftly so I don't lose you guys. I don't want to do that. I want to keep this as broad as possible. So the next person on the list I wanted to bring into this is the classical period itself, and of course it's Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. And this is his 41st symphony, his last symphony, written in 1788, a few years before he died. And you can see how this has changed. This is his last symphony, right? So he's clearly, a master of this form at this point of this genre. And you'll see the instrumentation becoming a little more what we had classical orchestra, right? Flute, oboes. There's 1 flute, which is unusual. Oboes, bassoons, horns, trumpets, timpani, strings, cello and bass playing on the same line. That's kind of a classical, early romantic, mid-romantic, I suppose, as well, standard. Is that the bass and the cello basically doubled. Sometimes they separate out, but basically on the same line. So that's kind of what we now expect to see in an orchestra in the classical period. 1788. That's where we get to there. Once we pass into the Romantic period, well, we get to the piece where we ended last time. We get to the one and only Beethoven's Symphony Number 3, Eroica. I talked about this last time as being the groundbreaking symphony, twice the length really of anything that had come before it. But again, let's just take a quick look at what's going on the side here. The instruments, you've got flutes, oboes, clarinets, bassoons, 2 of each. 3 horns, which is really unusual, but that's a characteristic of this piece. 2 trumpets, timpani, and then we've got our friends in the string section down here. And you see that this time the bass is actually separated out from the cello, which is 1803. So this is pushing on to the end of the classical period, I suppose, although it's a romantic piece. So that's what we expect to find at this time, at this period. Of course, there's no such thing as the end of classical, beginning of romantic. That never happened. I mean, there was a blending of composers and of composer styles and their own evolution and style throughout all that. But that's the Eroica. That's kind of what we expect to find at that time period. I'm going to push on quite a bit, actually. So we've got the 19th century, which evolves from the Eroica. Double winds, 2 horns, sometimes 4 horns, trumpets, and then I'm going to push on to a late 19th century piece. This is Tchaikovsky. This is the Tchaikovsky Pathetique Symphony, number 6. This is now 1893, and this to me is really one of the essences, one of the epitomes of the Romantic period, this symphony. It's by far Tchaikovsky's greatest work. But again, just looking very, very briefly at the instrumentation. Let me see if we can see it. Yeah, so you've got 2 flutes and 1 is on piccolo. It's a 3rd flute, but doubling piccolo. 2 oboes, 2 clarinets, 2 bassoons. So far, so good. Pretty straightforward. 4 horns in F. I'll talk about that sometime later as well. Trumpets, 2 trumpets in B flat. That doesn't mean B, this is the German, which means B flat. These are our trombones, 3 trombones. So that's a new thing that comes in during the 19th century, trombones. Beethoven 9, again. Actually, Beethoven 5 is where that starts. Bass, tuba, timpani, and then our strings here at the bottom. And you know when I talked about the cello and the bass being together during the classical period? Well, now look, not only are they separated out, but the basses themselves are divided. So we actually open the symphony with a divided bass voice, which is an expansion again. But the symphony orchestra is kind of formed here. I mean, this is where we're at. This is what we're expecting now from when we look on stage and when we hear these pieces. This is the kind of standard format that we expect. As we head on into the 20th century, there's a piece I just want to touch on before we get to the 20th century. That is a contemporary of Tchaikovsky. This was written, Tchaikovsky 6, written 1893. This piece was written 1894, 1 year later. This guy, Gustav Mahler, he was one of the guys who really did break the mold a bit like Beethoven. This is the 2nd symphony. This is the Resurrection Symphony. This thing's huge. This thing's absolutely massive. I mean, just a brief go down. Look, we've got 4 flutes now. The 3rd and 4th doubling piccolo. We've got 2 oboes, 3rd oboe, English horn. We have 3 clarinets there, 2 E-flat clarinets. Wow. That's 2 bassoons. That's 3rd bassoon playing contrabassoon. 6 horns, which he actually built. He calls for more at the end. I think it's 10 in the last movement. 4 trumpets, 4 trombones. That's tuba. Then massive percussion section, huge percussion section, and then we have there's 2 timpanis, 2 sets of timpani, 2 harps, and then our strings, who are also huge. So this thing's massive. And if you think that's not enough, of course at the end he brings in a chorus and an organ, and he has 2 soloists as well. So this is, yeah, I mean, it's taken Beethoven 9, I suppose, and just take it another level. The Resurrection Symphony, 1894. Okay, so this is taking things to a little bit extreme. We're heading into the 20th century where things start, Mahler is starting to push the boundaries of things in terms of orchestra and in the way he uses music and in the length of pieces that he's writing. His Third Symphony is the longest symphony really in standard repertoire. And we really push on from there into the 20th century. Although the orchestra itself doesn't change that much. The way it's used changes, but what you expect to see on stage, the sections, how they interact with each other, it's very similar from here on. Even the most extreme composers. I'm going to jump to the middle of the 20th century with another classic piece. This is the Bartok Concerto for Orchestra. You can't see here at the beginning all of the instruments because that's all who's playing at the beginning. It's basically just strings. You see there's a lot of strings doing weird stuff over here. So the techniques have changed of what the instruments are being asked to do. But the actual layout of the orchestra stays pretty much the same. Here's the instrumentation written out. 2 flutes, third doubling piccolo, 3 oboes, third doubling English horn, 3 clarinets, third doubling bass clarinet, 3 bassoons, third doubling double bassoon, 4 horns, 3 trumpets, 3 trombones, tuba, timp, percussion section, which is here, triangle, side drum, bass drum, cymbals, and tam-tam, which is a gong, 2 harps, and strings. So again, it's bigger, or it's more unusual, or it's using things in a different way, but we're still in the same area. And kind of where all this goes to, in my mind, eventually at the end of the 20th century, of course there are contemporary composers writing for orchestras, and they're doing incredible things and pushing boundaries in various different ways. But as we go through the 20th century, movie music becomes something really important for orchestras, and it becomes the way that people hear orchestras. So I think for my generation, Star Wars, E.T., John Williams. This is how we got into orchestras. And this is the score. This is Star Wars. This is what it looks like, just before you hear the very beginning. And the orchestration is pretty much the same as what you'd expect, right? Flute, piccolos, there's the oboes, clarinets, bassoons, 4 horns, 3 trumpets, trombones, percussion, harp, piano. Piano gets added, piano celeste. Somewhere in the 20th century, we start seeing the piano appearing in the orchestra, and strings at the bottom. And that's kind of where it splits a little bit, right? So we had movie music, and then we have classical music going on in a different way. We have other composers, contemporary composers, who are continuing that Western art music tradition for playing on a concert hall stage, but there's a direction that goes into movies, and that's kind of how we hear orchestras now. Mostly, you can go to a concert hall stage, you can put on a CD, you can listen to a recording, but when you turn on your TV and you're watching a movie and you hear an orchestra, this is kind of where it's at. So I'm going to stop here because that's a lot, and I didn't particularly intend to go too deeply into this, but I did want to give you a sense of classical music. Loaded term. Not quite sure how to define it. It's defined in many different ways. The musical periods themselves, the classical period being part of one of those, and then how the orchestra, because that's what I'm an orchestra guy, so that's how I enter the world of music, how the orchestra has evolved through those periods, and how it gets complicated. In late 20th century, early 21st century, it gets complicated. 20th century is full of all kinds of different ways to use the orchestra. One of the most radical, of course, was Stravinsky right at the beginning of the 20th century, The Rite of Spring. So, I'd like to thank you all for joining me, and if you like what you saw, please let me know. If you have any suggestions as well, let me know, and I hope to see you all again on Sunday. So